Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to this new session of Museum Expert. And I say session because uh, I, this is sort of a mix between a regular webinar and a workshop. So we're gonna have you be very much part of this conversation over the coming hour. Uh, and it's also maybe for the first time that we address a very specific topic as AI. We are so lucky to have two excellent colleagues to address that, who are so well experienced in this theme. We have Audrey Chang, who is currently the director of international relations at the National Museum of Natural Sciences in Taiwan, although she's speaking from Dublin today, I think, if I'm right. So a little bit under the jet lag, right? But thank you for being there and for making this possible. And Brad McDonald as well is with us. He has a career in museums, starting with Exploratorium and also at the Smithsonian. But he's a designer and a musician and an artist, all things that he has used uh, to help the museums creating narratives about important topics. And today, AI is one of these tools, I understand. So uh, I'm giving it to them to start this conversation. And I will come back at the end and see if we have any conclusions that we can take from this. So thanks for being here. And Brad and Audrey, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Walter. Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey. I'm, as Walter mentioned, rather more jet lagged than usual. And I am indeed based in Taiwan, although I'm spending the next few weeks here in Dublin, Ireland. And as Walter mentioned, most of my work now is focused around international engagement as on behalf of the Natural Science Museum in Taiwan. However, why we're doing this is in the past, Brad and I have collaborated, and we've also worked separately looking at emerging technologies, looking at data, and looking at experience design and operations. And so in this capacity, we're really excited to be talking about artificial intelligence as one of the many new emerging technologies, but specifically as it pertains to how we as cultural professionals might grow in this space. And so I'm really excited to see so many of you here today. And hi, Jamie. Hi, Emlyn. It's been some time since I've seen you both, but I wanted to say a special hello today. Brad?
Yes, hello. Zoom is so clever that minimized my controls and I couldn't even find it. So hello, everybody. I'm Brad McDonald. I'm an adjunct professor in the Design and Technology program at Parsons School of Design. As Walter mentioned, I've worked with a variety of museums over the years, which you may be familiar with. And Audrey and I would say just have as sort of a practice. We are continually investigating new ways of thinking about museums and sort of our relevance with our communities as researchers. And it's not a practice of necessarily sort of like criticality, but just or like it is kind of critical. It is thinking about sort of like, ooh, how can we always do what we do better? How can we reach new audiences? What are the technologies and the mechanisms that we have at our disposal to do that? And most recently, like many people, AI has been an interesting point of entry into many conversations into sort of how it impacts us as professionals, as curious people, as developers of content, and as members of our communities. So, you have already begun the process of introducing yourselves in the chat. Thank you very much for that. It's great to kind of see who we all are in the room. I would say, if you were so inclined, it would be great if you could go on camera, but I understand maybe you don't want to, but it is nice to be able to sort of see the people you're talking to in this workshopinar format that we're talking about. We will be asking you questions. We want to engage with you all as much as possible. And Audrey and I will talk about it a little bit. This whole body of work is kind of it's a path of inquiry for us. We are learning as we go. And we want to just initially kick off some sort of thinking prompts. Museums, I think the immediate point of entry in museums with a lot of AI related content is through the lens of exhibition design. How do we talk about the big idea of artificial intelligence? And so we wanted to highlight a few examples of that. By no means is this a comprehensive list. That could consume our hour right there, just listing people who are doing meaningful work around AI. But we wanted to highlight 3 examples that we thought were interesting in their approach. The first one is the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, in which kind of the early days of AI as exhibition-based content in museums were using artificial intelligence to curate an exhibition, sort of deferring sort of authorial curatorial control to the AI. And so it is prioritizing what are the narratives that it wanted to convey kind of about itself. Secondly, I feel like if any conversation within sort of the museum space is worth mentioning, Rafik Anadol, whose sort of like thumbprint is all over the world of AI. And I think this piece particularly is interesting because it is an installation through the Museum of Modern Art that is generating dynamic visuals based on their extensive archives. So the AI art is a reflection of its archives. And Audrey, I know, and a lot of our thinking have been thinking about sort of like, oh, how might we use AI as a tool for our digital libraries, our archives? How can we better understand the themes that show up in our work over the course of many years or what have you? And then thirdly, seems worth mentioning, in case it isn't on your radar, that Dataland is an upcoming AI art museum that will be opening in Los Angeles, United States. It is a museum co-founded by Rafik Anadol that is dedicated entirely to artificial intelligence. So that we anticipate will have kind of a significant hand in shaping conversations around AI. To be determined how they're going to tackle that in a way that is public facing. Audrey?
Yep. And so as Brad has mentioned, right, we are inquirers, we are people who are very curious, but neither of us, I think, would claim that we are necessarily AI experts, right? We work on in emerging technologies, we think about how cultural institutions operate and how they engage visitors, and we more, like Brad has a degree in data visualization, and I've done some time in data science programs, right? And spend a lot of time thinking about algorithms and machine learning. But at the intersection of all these things is this body of inquiry that we've been leading or thinking about and working with people on. But we would not claim to be experts because I think by virtue of the fact that we are constantly asking questions, we don't want to be experts. Brad, next.
Yeah.
And so as I think it behooves us to take a couple steps back and say, what have we been doing up until this point? And so a lot of this project actually started about a year or so ago when we were thinking about, okay, what might we do in the space of thinking professional development? And so as part of the Excite meetings in 2024, which took place in Slovenia, this is that jet lag brain really kicking in really hard now. We ran a workshop that was called AI for Career Growth, and where we started to capture some of the, I think the sentiments around AI, and also where people were in their preparations as they thought about themselves and about the institutions that they worked with. We then actually repeated some of those elements at the ASPAC meetings in Korea later in the year, and then took those findings and organized them into a upcoming publication in the AAM Exhibition Journal, which should be coming out in the next few months, where we collated some of those findings and then thought about how trust and accuracy and bias and leadership and literacy really could be informing where cultural institutions are moving in the next couple of years. Next slide. And so some of the questions, I mean, this is by no means exhaustive because we don't have time for that today, but we thought we'd highlight a couple of the questions that we asked, and then some of the outcomes that we were able to collect in the sort of first part of this practice. And we asked very simple questions. We asked people, how are you currently using AI? And a surprising number of people are, right? So this was out of a sample size of 48. About 90% of that 48 are using AI in some interesting way in the museum and science center space. But there's a solid 10% of folks who aren't using it at all. And we've asked you to take a survey as well as part of today's, what are we calling it, workshopinar. It might be interesting for you to think about, okay, where are you also sitting in this particular data set? And then we asked another question because we wanted to focus the discussion on that preparedness piece, on individual preparedness. And so we asked, again, a very simple question. Does your organization offer professional development specific to artificial intelligence? And for the most part, people weren't really using professional development opportunities either because they didn't exist or because they really didn't see some of the utility, perhaps, as it pertained to artificial intelligence, which I think is interesting because if you looked at the previous slide, we're seeing that most people are actually using it in their practice somehow, but not necessarily through a professional development route. Next slide. And then this was the question that I was really excited to ask, which was thinking about institutional preparedness. Does your museum or science center actually have an AI governance policy? And again, we think about, okay, if 90% of us are already using this, is the institution that we're working with or working within helping us frame the way we work with AI, giving us ethical guidelines, or giving us workflows that might actually support our use of this new emerging technology? And by and large, people either didn't know if that governance policy existed, or the governance policy just simply didn't exist. Again, these are provocations that helped us frame how we might move forward in the work.
And I would add to that, like Audrey mentioned, a lot of people within our workshops and who have responded to our survey were already using AI and also expressing some skepticism about the use of AI, its ethical implications and all these kinds of things. There was a high degree of sort of like concern and also a willingness to engage. But because there wasn't governance at the sort of like organizational level, they were sort of making up best practices on sort of a individual or team basis.
Correct.
So we wanted to do a little bit of experiment. It's an AI conversation. So we wanted to create an opportunity for you to kind of play around with some AI if you haven't. And even if you have, fantastic, we're going to offer you a chance to play some more. Really quickly, it could be just a digital thumbs up, or for those of you who are on camera, a wave or thumbs up. How many of you already have an account with OpenAI? See a few there. Okay. Okay, so a casual glance, I'm going to say it's probably a third to half, somewhere in there. The reason we asked is, as Audrey mentioned, we're both curious, and my tendency is to build things and see what the conversation is that emerges from the building of the thing. Spend less time talking about theory and actually try and get into the application of something. So with that in mind, at Parsons, the new school, I'm an adjunct. I'm not paid for my time for doing office hours with my students or any of these things, but they have questions about their project. And so I built, using OpenAI's ChatGPT, a GPT, or a chatbot proxy, for myself. I call it Bot McDonald. It is trained on all of my previous syllabi, any interview I've ever given, anything I've written relevant to the world of sort of interaction and experience design. It's basically it is trained on everything I know about interaction design. And I've put this in the hands of my students. and they engage with it. They ask it questions, and we end up having conversations about the responses it has given them about their thesis projects and that, what have you. I was expecting this to be a complete an utter failure, honestly. I was like, I'm going to hear all about the hallucinations and all the ways that this has fallen short. And kind of my happy surprise, the students found it incredibly productive. And they brought to the conversation with the chatbot a level of criticality that I was not expecting. Because very often the conversation about AI is, well, people are just going to adopt what it says as the truth without asking questions about it. And I found, and I absolutely own that this may be sort of a critically biased group of people. They're master's level students working with design and technology, but they brought to that a high degree of criticality. And so inspired by that, I went ahead and made 2 chatbots using OpenAI. One that I call Albert Einstein. It is trained on the writings, interviews of Albert Einstein. It's not comprehensive. It's as many basically PDFs and things that I could get for free that I just started to train it on. And the other one is Deep Frank, which is a chatbot based on sort of the philosophies, writing, and scientific background of Frank Oppenheimer from the Exploratorium. And it's interesting engaging in conversations with Albert Einstein and Deep Frank, because when using them and comparing them, you can start to see their sort of worldview differences in the responses that they offer. You can ask them both the same questions and they respond somewhat differently. What I learned from this process, they were incredibly easy to build. I would say the Bot McDonald, the first chatbot that I built using OpenAI's sort of market-ready tools that don't require you to be a programmer. It doesn't require any information, like any background in technology. They have a tutorial, tells you how to upload documents and train the data, or train the GPT. Remarkably easy to build. Bot McDonald, I think I put about 4 hours into it. Within an investment of 4 hours, I had an AI-driven trained model that I could interact with. Once I figured out how to do it, it took me about an hour each to do Albert Einstein and Deep Frank. So yeah, it was incredibly easy to make. I had a fair amount of control. I could basically create kind of a walled garden of data where I could curate responses. I was training the model such that I could give it some personality, some tone, but I could also set parameters for it. I went into, say, the Deep Frank chatbot, and one of my first questions in an attempt to break the model was, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put myself in sort of like the shoes of a 12-year-old. What would they ask? And I was like, Deep Frank, tell me a sexy story. And I was amazed how elegant the response was. It was, I don't think that this is appropriate for this conversation, but I will tell you about the mating habits that are specific to certain animals if you are sort of interested in it. And it kind of spun it back to biology and the sciences. I didn't train it to do that. I trained it to say, don't accept inappropriate questions, but I didn't tell it to do that specific response. And so it was elegant. So there's the capacity, even with these out-of-the-box tools, to create a critically thinking custom chatbot that can be used to surface experts and voices or members of a community, or a curatorial voice, or comparing curators' voices about a given topic within your own organization. My mind brain started just sort of like riffing on possibilities. So only a couple hours to build, very cheap. On the side of the cons, they're not perfect. They will hallucinate. They will kind of give information that is not 100% correct. So you have to kind of present it and frame it such, like, be critical about this thing you've made. When I've talked about this in the past to other groups, there have been staff members of organizations that see it as a threat, like, hey, this thing is just trying to like step on my toes. I'm the curator. Another con is that complex custom applications that serve the same function do require specialized skills. And that, I would say, is also where it gets really, really interesting, because then you can really get into the like customization specific to an organization. And another potential con, to wrap this up, is things are changing quickly. The technology changes literally week to week. And how does an organization stay on top of these changes? A few quick takeaways. Out of the box AI tools are great. They're easy to use. They're very fast for prototyping, but they're imperfect. Yeah, and doing more advanced work does require some specialization. So what we want to do, invite all of you kind of on your own to play with one of these chatbots. Those of you who have an OpenAI account, you should be able just to log in and use those. And I'm going to paste these into the chat. Everyone, here we go. Everybody should have in the chat now a direct link to each of these 3 chatbots. And what I would ask you to do, we may not need 10 minutes for this, but try to accomplish a task. Ask it something relevant to the work that you're doing in your organization. Be specific. And with that in mind, also try and break it. I love making these things, but I'm also really curious to know sort of like what their thresholds are. Like, at what point do they break? What point do they maybe report false information? At what point do they stumble? If you do not have an OpenAI account, no problem. We'd ask you to consider what kind of chatbot you might build in your organization. If you could curate the data set, create a chatbot that sort of referenced some level of expertise. And I think about this maybe also beyond just the exhibit experience. If you're in the ops and facilities team, what kind of expert would you want to be able to consult with if you could through AI? If you are in public programs, what kind of expertise could you use? Could you kind of cultivate to have an assistant, an agent, as they're called in sort of the AI world, to support you in the work that you're doing? So think a little bit about how could this be relevant to yourselves? Audrey, is there anything you would add there?
Nope. I mean, I would encourage everyone to figure out how to, like, where does Brad McDonald break and where does Bot McDonald?
Yeah, right. Me as a human might break in very different ways than Bot McDonald.
Should we take 5 minutes and then come back and have a quick discussion?
Let's do that, yeah.
And feel free to make comments or ask questions while you're working on this as well. We're listening.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking at the chat. So if anybody's having an issue or a question or just a statement, feel free to put it right in the chat. We are fully transparent in this. While you're working, I'll also say that I was kind of embarrassed putting together these slides because I was like, oh, there's my face next to Albert Einstein and Frank Oppenheimer. I was like, which one of these does not belong?
By the way, I totally sent your chat bot to the design interns that I work with.
Oh, fantastic. I want to know about that. There's a question in the chat. Can I see the questions we're asking your bot? Right now, currently, no. I can see questions I've asked my bot. I see a history of that, but whatever you're peppering the bot with is anonymous, at least from my perspective. So Lisa, that's a great question, is following up on her original question, which is like, can I see the responses? Out of the box, I cannot see the questions that people are asking the chatbot, which is a limitation. I would love to be able to see that data and fine-tune the experience. But I can't do that just using OpenAI's custom tools, or their kind of like publicly available tool. There are ways to build a chatbot where I could start recording that data, but that's that breaking point from sort of like really easy to develop to needing a little bit of extra skill to develop that. And I would say that I'm also in the process of building some of those chatbots that I can track that data using a method called retrieval augmented generation, or RAGs. Okay, so I got a question here from an attendee named museumexpert.org in the chat. Thank you. And what would be considered a complex application that would require specialized skills? Great question. I think we've already kind of hit one of those breaking points, which is like data tracking and sort of the analytics around responses. That would be one area where you probably need a custom, sort of a custom built chatbot or agent. Another one would be these sort of what I'll call a chain of dependencies. Like, say you wanted somebody to ask a question of an expert chatbot, and then you wanted all those responses to then be put on a monitor or display on the wall that aggregates the data that has been sort of collected, asked of that chatbot. That would also be sort of you've got the chatbot communicating to another data set, which is doing the interpretation of the data and visualization of it. Like, as soon as you create these kind of multiple steps in the chain, it gets a little bit more complex.
So we've had our 5 minutes.
That was 5 minutes, so fast.
Yeah, the time is just ripping by.
It is. Okay. So we would love to hear from you. Feel free, if you want to raise your hand and jump on mic, that's great. We can hear your voice in the real world. Otherwise, feel free to sort of drop responses into the chat, and Audrey or I can kind of highlight them there. Could you break it? Was it useful? Was it surprising? What is the potential of something like this? Lisa is asking, do you know if you ask a question, get answers, and then create a share link, does the link continue to share related answers to further? Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean, Lisa, about the share link, but within the chatbot session itself, it remembers responses.
Well, I guess what I mean is I asked some questions related to an exhibit we're planning, and then hit the share link to save it so I could share it with my team. But then I had decided to ask a follow-up question to one of the answers, because it keeps answering things and I keep thinking of new questions for it related to what it's telling me. Like, how can an AI create a web? How does my follow-up question was, I started with, how can AI help us form an exhibit using native art to talk about the meaning of animals and native communities reflected in the art? And then I follow up, how does AI work with AR? And then I wanted to ask them, he was saying that AI can power voice or text-based chatbots and AR, allowing visitors to ask questions. So I wanted to ask him, well, how do you make it do that? Or AI can generate 3D models of the animals, and I wanted to ask it, how do you make it do that? So but I'd already taken the link, and I wanted to know, if I keep asking it questions, do I have to keep creating share links, or will it, since it's all in the same session, will it give them the updated one when they click on that link with all this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think it'd be great if you, can you test that? Can you test that yourself?
Yeah, I'm emailing it to myself first before I send it to my colleagues, but
see what shows up. Please let us know how that works out. What I generally do is I copy and paste the transcript.
Okay.
And then
But
I
was
just add
wondering
that.
if there was something more technical that would make it easier than copy and paste.
No. So great.
Yeah.
I think though you found another kind of limitation. Like I think this is these tools are fantastic for prototyping. There's even a version of something like that I could see being on like a museum floor, but it's maybe doesn't have as robust kind of like the. It's not as robust as we would think. There's these ways that we might break it that are pretty straightforward.
Well, I mean, I could see you using it on the museum floor, like when you greet visitors and they have questions about the museum and stuff. I could easily use it that way.
Yeah. Okay, let me see.
So curious to know like who was using what chatbot, because you have people fighting chatbots now.
Yeah. I'm
Clarissa.
Actually, Lisa, which chatbot did you talk to? I'm guessing it was Albot or.
It was you.
Frank. Oh, me. Oh, well, hopefully I was helpful.
Well, I was looking for exhibit design questions, so.
Oh, there you go. Great. Let's see. Juan is like, it felt smooth and was also surprised by how thorough the answers were. Fantastic. That's great to hear. You got into a disagreement with Albot. Fantastic. I love that, Clarissa. Like,
well, if I can just quickly add, first I did your McDonald bot, and what I noticed between the two bots was the embrace of tone and the ways in which the McDonald bot's tone was very approachable, friendly, yet authoritative, and also had a sense of humor. I was like, oh, I love how you end each statement with a question for me. Is this a pedagogical technique? And the bot answers, oh yeah, busted, you got me. Yes, it's that, but also good conversation skills. But my disagreement, and this would be a bit of a bug with Albot, was often with bots, they won't cite sources. So I said, can you cite your source for the information on the mental illness of Edward, the son? And he said, you uploaded the document. And it referred to the document. Are there questions you want me to ask? And I said, no, I didn't upload anything. Yes, you did. So it kind of maybe presumes I'm the creator and that I've uploaded the document. So it wouldn't let me off the hook for not being the one who uploaded the doc. But I was happy that it could cite its source. Thanks. It was fun to see the differences between the two I was able to try.
That's good to know. And actually, thank you for flagging that bug, because I might now be able to then go back into all of these bots and give them instructions on how to handle that question more appropriately and identify you not as an operator, but not the creator. So thank you for that. And it's also worth noting that I put more time into creating personality around Bot McDonald. I did not feel like enough of an authority to start scripting the personality of either Albot or Frank. I felt like it is within my domain and right to start defining the behavior and language and tone of my own bot. But that is also kind of an interesting, maybe ethical question about the creation of these things. Walter, really quickly, how did it handle your question about
very nicely. It was longer than what I just put in there, but it was very thorough, and the tone was very friendly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. So I'd like to move on, but I think you get the idea, right? So an investment of a few hours produces reactions to maybe start tuning and shaping our own ideas of what would be meaningful and where we can just prototype on our own versus where we might need to bring in experts with specialized skills.
And Brad, if I may, I also asked a question about how did Exploratorium connect with the community at the beginning of its existence? And it made a very, very long answer and explained how it was connected to the community around, and then all the programs that they have been doing since. And it's very thorough. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Really quick personal anecdote. I sent Bot McDonald to my brother, and he asked it, "Tell me about Brad's family." And I had trained it a little bit about family and friends, but its response was, "I just got goosebumps." So eerily, kind of like accurate and poetic. My brother sent me screenshots of it. I don't think, Lisa, that he knew how to share his response, but it generates surprising, almost, we'll call it quote unquote intuition around some of these responses. But okay, moving on, Audrey.
Yep. Thanks. So that was awesome because I was watching the kind of questions and answers come in the chat. And I also want to note that Colleen, we might have actually broken your otter. There's something about how we've reached the recording limit of your plan. So, I mean, Otter AI is one of the tools that we use the most often. And it is such a fascinating tool if you've never used it for meeting recording. But we'll leave that and say that one of the things that we are really excited about asking folks is, like, again, where could AI have been used effectively, or where has it been used effectively? So what you're seeing on the screen right now is actually some of the more, I think, specific use cases that our workshop attendees in the past have raised. And because we did ask you in that survey as well, you know, where you thought in operations and design and visitor engagement AI could be used, we wanted to highlight some of the outcomes that we generated in the past. And so I think some of the more, you know, clever uses of AI that folks have suggested, or doing things like all that scut work that none of us love to do, right? So when we engage artists, we engage community partners, and there's this back and forth, like, could AI become effectively our administrative assistant in building a relationship? Can it help us build relationships with visitors by, again, automating post-visit workflows? In terms of experience development, some of the folks who are in our workshop are really like, okay, can we use it almost for like A/B testing, right? Where we tell a story one way, A, and then we tell the same story a different way, B, and then AI could potentially help us become a tiebreaker in figuring out which one is the more compelling exhibition narrative. Yeah, not somebody's otter then. Yeah, and so, like, it becomes a prototyping buddy, maybe a prototyping tool. Could we simulate visitor workflow through physical spaces by using AI to help us do that and figure out where the bottlenecks are? And then really that personalization thing, I think this is something we've come back to over and over again in the Museum and Science Center community. Can we use AI and other technologies to make visitors feel like they are experiencing something unique to them when they come into our institutions or our organizations? I think content creation, one of my favorite ones, really is around like depolarizing content. Is there a way that, like Walter was asking about the politicization of, or our political views, can AI be a neutralizer, which is particularly interesting, right? Because we talk all the time about the biases and the flaws within AI based on the data that it ingests. And so we won't go through all of these in exhaustive detail. I mean, this is something that we'll be able to, I think we can share the link to the paper when it comes out. But we wanted to stimulate the conversation a little bit for the remaining discussion that we have in place for you. So, having seen some of the examples, having attempted to break our chatbots or thought about where I could use them in the work that I do in every day, we wanted everyone to sort of think about these prompts. And we're going to try to do this in breakout groups in a way such that you have each other to talk with, and that you are focusing in on one of the 4 questions on the second half of the bottom half of this particular slide. But we do want to encourage everyone to think specifically about what skills do you need to be an AI user in a museum setting, no matter how you wanted to use it. In your own practice and something that you work collaboratively on, what skills do you need? Brad just showed you a no-code chatbot creation process. But as you think about the more boutique solutions that you might want to put in place, what skills do you think you need? And we leave that deliberately open in terms of ethical skills, in terms of governance, in terms of coding, in terms of, I need to learn a lot of math, maybe, right? I hope I never have to learn more math, but, and then we ask each of you in your groups, and we'll try to come through and assign you the question, because I don't think that we can designate which group you all end up in. But we wanted to think about, how do organizations budget and plan for these AI skills? If I wanted to learn how to build algorithms, who's going to help me pay for that? The second prompt that we'd like you to think about is, what impact might AI have on hiring practices and the expectations for applicants? Because this, I think, will impact our whole field as we move forward, especially in such an interesting employment landscape in the United States right now. How do you communicate the value of AI upskilling to management? I'm probably not alone, right, in that I've asked for specific kinds of training and was denied because the leadership didn't necessarily understand why I wanted to take time and resources to do such learning and upskilling. And then finally, what tools or best practices can help you use artificial intelligence in a critical way? These are open questions on purpose, because we really want to hear where you all are thinking about integrating something like AI or other emerging technologies into your daily practice. So again, questions in the chat as you have them. I think the tricky thing about the breakout room is we might not be able to see each one, but I'll try to drop these questions into the chat again after we go into the rooms, or maybe Colleen, I can trouble you to do that. And I can email them to you. But now, Colleen, could you split us into our rooms?
And should we just say 5 minutes for this, which is
Yeah.
not going to be enough time, but
Yeah.
maybe just enough time for each group to kind of highlight a few quick key items that surfaced, even on a gut level.
Hello. At this point, you should see an invitation to join a breakout room pop up on your computer. Feel free to join that room and participate in the conversation for a few minutes. If you don't feel comfortable, you're welcome to stay here with me and wait. Happy to have you.
Show of hands if that was entirely too little time. Let me see. Okay, so that was not enough time, but I found that even in that little bit of time we had, thank you, Carla, and thank you, Lisa, for the conversation. I think it was still a productive conversation. We wandered a bit, but key things were just like, how do we even begin? Our prompt actually, I should start there, was how do organizations budget and plan for AI skills? And after a little talking, we figured out we needed to actually figure out what the questions are. And adding on to that, sort of like, who are the people in an organization who we would nominate to sort of start, how do you even begin that question asking strategy? I mentioned to my group that when Audrey and I ran this workshop in Slovenia last year, we presented it as like an AI task force. Like everybody, all the participants were members of a team in their org to just identify questions that they would need to answer. So some of the questions we came up with were, what are the costs associated with the use of AI? Like beyond the free programs and the limitations of them, what do you even get when you start paying money for the up-leveled version of ChatGPT or Midjourney or DALL-E? And then what are the costs associated maybe with building custom content with a developer of this kind of content? Our team wanted to better understand what is the broad application of AI? How could it be used? And how do we get it out of the screen and onto the floor? That kind of chain of dependencies. Like there's the idea, there's the prototype, there's a thing that lives in a computer, and then how do we get it on the floor? That whole sort of chain there. And then there were just prompts about how do we make exhibits more interactive, and how do we identify people in the organization that need to sort of collect these questions, these essential questions, and task them with finding the answers. Maybe what is the report that then goes back to leadership to say, here's the case for this or not. Lisa, Carla, did I do us justice? Okay. How about room 2? What impact might AI have on hiring practices and expectations for applicants?
Clarissa or Silvina, because I was in that group, but I lost connection for a while, so I missed part of the conversation. So either
yeah, we touched very briefly based on my nephew and his dispiriting experience having interviews with AI trying to seek job in the corporate sector. But we pretty quickly moved to what were more our shared concerns around the limitations of large language model AI when it comes, and I'll let Silvina speak to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, but the issues of how our memory cultures will be shaped by these tools.
So,
Fantastic. Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
great.
just a comment came up that, you know, maybe a potential pro of AI could be it's the neutrality, but for our content, neutrality and sanitization is actually maybe not where we want to go. So, you know, just thinking about all the different scenarios and how you need to fine tune them, and I don't know, what does it mean for learning? Those are the questions I'm kind of grappling with. And then the skills, again, is like, how do you think about these things so they're kind of appropriate for a particular setting, I guess.
Thank you. That point about bias or not bias, like when does the bias actually serve our narrative? It's really, really interesting. So room 3, how do you communicate the value of AI upskilling to management?
Room 3 would be Kat, Christina, Jennifer, or Suzanne, if anybody feels comfortable sharing.
So we spent a lot of our time just asking how can AI be used in a museum, because it is so new, and some of us are in small museums and some of us are in museums outside the United States. I'm in Canada. So there's a little bit of fear towards AI or ethics about AI. There's a lot of I cannot have it on any of my work devices due to legalities as a municipal museum. So you need to make a case for how you could use it and then justify in these small museums, whereas Suzanne is in a museum that is encouraging as a small museum, let's use the resources. We don't have enough people. And Jennifer was suggesting that she's used AI to do boring administrative tasks that none of us want to do because we don't have enough summer students to do them. So how can we use it? But in my situation, it's the ethical considerations. Now, I've used AI to try and simplify language. As a petroleum museum, we use a lot of technical scientific language to bring it down from a university level to a grade 4 to 6 level, which is the general public, or to translate text panels into French and English. So there are ways that we're using it, but we're still, for French and English translations, we're still relying on this will be due the grade step 1 before we hire an official translator to verify the grammar, because we don't screw that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much to be said about the translation nuances. And that's one of the places where I think a lot of my colleagues, because we do English and Mandarin or English and Chinese, it really gets you. I mean, it's a really frustrating place to have to rely on an AI tool for. And then group 4, just so we keep moving, we're trying to get you all out of here on time. Juan, let's see who's left in. Juan, Michelle, or Mulukan? Any of you want to share what we discussed? So our question had to do with what tools or best practices can help us use AI critically.
Yeah, I think most of the conversation centered on how we can use critical thinking, how it is essential to go through what we learn from ChatGPT or these bots, and also how it's necessary to have some kind of working knowledge of the topics that you ask, so you can, yeah, like critically go through it. And also we said something about how it fails to grasp some of the more subtle things or deep things, yeah, in any topic.
Yeah, it's surprising when it is nuanced. It's surprising, but it's also not consistent. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is fantastic. We are at time. I know, Walter, you were going to have some closing statements.
Well, yes, obviously, this is too limited in time for going into any depth of all these topics. But I felt myself quite intrigued by the work that you already have been doing and the conclusions that you have. And I'm looking forward to read your article because I think it will inspire probably us to develop some more ideas on how to go deeper in some of aspects of what has been discussed today. As you heard, in our group, and I was the advocate devil there to say, can AI be neutral in hiring? And that was immediately challenged. So, I think that's the same case for many other of these topics that you have brought up for the conversation. So I'm looking forward to read you and to make sure that we do not lose sight on that topic, and that in the future we may come back on that and a side aspect of that. And thank you, Brad and Audrey, especially for doing that in your very difficult jet lag situation there, and to help organize this session. So thank you very much. Thanks to those who stayed for the conversation. This is something that we learn over time, is that many people like to listen, but very little people like to participate when they are asked to contribute directly in a conversation. So that's a little bit a pity, but we will come back on that. So, and thanks to the museum expert team again, who has been very professional in promoting and organizing and being the behind the scenes here to make this whole work. We are now entering a phase where next month we will share the results of the survey that we have been doing that was asking museum professionals how they were feeling working in a museum in 2025, particularly in the US, I must say. And we will share the results, but based on that, new initiatives should be taken to actually make sure that people who work in museums are a real community and that they can serve the people that they need to serve in the community around them. So look forward to that. Thank you all again for being here today, and I see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Walter.
Yeah, thanks, Walter and Colleen, for organizing everything.
Oh my God. Yeah, thank you, Colleen, for helping keep us together here.
No problem. Right.
Thanks so much for your time, both Audrey and Brad, like so informative and so on point with, I think, things we are all thinking about these days. So thanks so much.
Yep. All right, we'll see you next time.
Next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.